CORMAC, BLOODAXE, was a champion of the blood god Khorne and a fearsome chieftain and king amongst the Norse tribes. The son of the slain High King Varag Skulltaker, CORMAC harbored a soul-blackening hatred towards the newly ascendant empire that had slaughtered and driven his people back to the barren Northlands. His greatest resentment was reserved for the Unberogans and their king, Sigmar Heldenhammer, who had led the charge against the northern tribes. The molten core of violence within him, as well as his favor in the eyes of the blood god, proved a potent force in unifying the scattered tribes of the Northmen. Clad in his father's chaos plate and wielding a burning axe in which was bound the spirit of a demon of Khorne, he was an avenging fury that laid waste to the enemies of his people. In time, tales of CORMAC's victories and strength reached to the eastern lands, drawing the Kurgan and Hung tribes to pledge their lives to his banner. In the year 9 IC, he led the Norse wolfships to ravage the coastal regions of the Udoses tribe, before putting the town of Hogvrik to the torch and slaying all within as a sacrifice to Khorne. CORMAC then led the Norse to the Udoses capital and destroyed the castle of Zalsenhus, personally slaying Volfilla, chieftain of the Udoses, and crucifying him. The Norse armies then marched unimpeded through the outlying imperial territories, putting countless townships to the torch. When the Emperor finally marshaled the tribes to face them, his army fared no better, and was forced to retreat to the city of Middenheim. The Norse followed the battered remnants of Sigmar's army, intending to slay the Emperor and corrupt the sacred flame of Ulrich, thus destroying the faith of the Empire itself. The siege itself lasted over a dozen days. On the 13th, most terrible day of the siege, CORMAC BLOODAXE, who had slain so many in battle that his axe now perpetually ran thick with congealed blood, awoke knowing the will of his god was to be carried out. For his veins throbbed, and his vision streaked with red, as though an endless gourd of blood was being poured over his head. His shaman, Karodaken, had a great pit where the Norse had thrown the corpses of their enemies in honor of Khorne, and there did CORMAC command the greatest warriors of 8 clans to sacrifice themselves to Khorne's glory. However, the warlord had been deceived. The shaman told CORMAC his role was to fight alongside a lord of Khorne. In truth, he was to become one. CORMAC's body and soul were ripped apart to serve as the host for a creature older than time and more terrible than nightmare. A bloodthirster of Khorne. It took every scrap of Karodaken's power to summon such a mighty champion of the blood god, and the shaman had been forced to bind his life force to it to seal the pact. However, the results were undeniable. The runes Alaric had carved to stave off the Norsemen's sorceries disintegrated from its mere existence. Men of the Empire wept and vomited blood, and those who had only moments before been fighting like heroes of legend fled from the monstrous shadow that filled the sky with its bulk. The demon cared not for the lesser mortals fighting the Norsi, and flew directly to the center of the city, to the flame of Ulrich, to Sigmar. The Norsemen roared their exultation to the cold thrones of the gods, their cries now even more hideously animalistic than those of the beast-kin who stood alongside them, and they fought with fury so redoubled that none could withstand them. Such was their joy to fight under the gaze of a living avatar of Khorne the Mighty. Of the 100 men who stood with Sigmar, fully a third dropped dead from terror at the sight of the abomination that landed in their midst. Others fled in terror, leaving only a staunch few able to overcome their fear. Like the darkest desires of men and beasts knitted together in a nightmare, it was a creature of darkness dragged into the light by dreams of blood. It stood 4 times the height of a man on back-jointed legs, its body vast and muscled, sheathed in bronze and iron. Its flesh was the brutal color of charred corpses, and the stink of the grave was pressed into its wiry fur. The blunt wedge of its horned head was filled with serrated fangs, and its eyes were like holes pierced in the flank of a volcano. Enormous wings of smoking darkness spread out behind it, and flagstones shattered as its enormous weight landed. It clutched a bronze axe in one meaty fist, and a writhing, whip-like cat-o'-nine tails in the other. The ends of the barbed whip slashes ended in wailing skulls that dripped blood from their empty eye sockets. It was only through the aid of Mercer, warrior eternal of the Faustschlag, and the divine power of Ulrich himself, that Sigmar was able to marshal enough strength to defeat his foe, banishing the demon to the realm of chaos. With its defeat, the morale of the Norse army gave out, and they now fought their way past the vengeful press of Imperials to reach their wolf ships and return to their new homeland. Though the Empire was ultimately victorious, the dreadful memory of how close it had come to desolation loomed long in the memories of all who had fought and suffered in the invasion, and few would ever forget the terror of the mighty Norsemen. CORMAC's flaming demon axe became a powerful artifact amongst Norscan chieftains, and would be wielded by uncounted numbers of mighty champions of the Dark Gods. Next, the Khorne champion known as the Slayer of Souls and the Butcher of Immortals.